We heal as a team. We're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It is Friday, January 20th, 2012. I'm your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com, and this is another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. Tonight, coming up, second segment, I'm going to be bringing on my guest. He's going to be hanging out for about 35 to 45 minutes tonight. Got him for a little while. He came on, he agreed to come on last minute for me, last minute notice here. Hacker Winston Smith, you've heard him on my radio show here before. He will be coming on, and we're going to be discussing the SOPA and PIPA blackout, the protest against it over the past few days, and the takedown of Mega Upload and the response by Anonymous. Now, personally, I don't know if I can trust this response by Anonymous. This is my personal take on it, and I'm not saying that I'm not bashing Anonymous or anything. What I'm saying is I don't know if this is if it's all that it looks to be. Like if it's as simple as Anonymous just getting, striking back at them. It's a little too convenient for the timing. And I just, as I've said before, when it comes to Anonymous, and Winston has explained, he was even told by an insider at the last massive hacking conference they have out in Nevada. I forget what it's called. It goes on every year, DEF CON. And when he was out there a few months ago, and he spoke to a government insider who told him that there were certain people in Anonymous that were control the opposition, and they get the others to follow them. And they have plans, I should say, of using Anonymous to do things, therefore, to quote-unquote justify, to bring in stricter internet measures. So who knows? I don't know exactly where he's going to go and, what he's going to, what his take on it is. I don't know what the the deal is with it. I've seen everybody, oh, the first shots in the internet war have been fired. But like, you know, ladies and gentlemen, before I jump on anything, I like to make sure I know what's going on. And I don't know if I can trust that everything is on the up and up. Not until I at least talk to Winston. Again, I didn't get a chance to really talk to him off air, so I don't know what his take on it or what he knows, you know, from behind the scenes. So I haven't the foggiest about it, except from what I've seen through the media coverage of it, whether it be mainstream media or alternative media. But again, even if it is real, even if it is it really was anonymous, then they really, if you look at what they did, they didn't, the media makes it out, oh my God, they're taking on the DOJ, they took down their website. Yeah, they took down the DOJ's website so that you couldn't go to like doj.gov. Do you think that really affected the email of anybody in the Department of Justice? No. They have their own closed system. And when I was in the Guard, and this goes back 8 years, they had people that were IT specialists then that their job was to keep people out and keep if somebody in the Guard did something stupid and clicked on a bad link, it was their job to monitor things and make sure nothing bad could get in. They monitored everything you did live time. And this was 8 years ago they could do this. So, I mean, think what they could do now. People need to step back and think a little clearer and realize what's going on. So anyway, what is SOPA, right? What exactly is SOPA, for people that don't know? It's pretty much the federal government's answer via their buddies over in Hollywood and the IRA, all these lobbying companies. You get people like Chris Dodd. What a scumbag. Get into him in a minute. But SOPA is basically the way that through Hollywood, and of course it's sponsored by always the same people, it's being pushed to destroy the internet. Now you can go look it up. By now you ought to know what SOPA is. I mean, even the brain dead pretty much know what it is. If you don't, I suggest you go look it up. SOPA and PIPA, SOPA, PIPA. And it's pretty much, it would destroy the internet, literally. It would destroy the DNS registry, everything. So think about it this way. It's a bunch of old men. A lot of these congressmen and senators are old, right? It's a bunch of 65, 70-year-old guys determining the fate of the internet. And some of these guys can't even control the VCR or the DVD player now. They couldn't even set the time on it. So that's a very scary thought, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I got a little sidetracked for a second, but what I was getting into with the anonymous attack is I don't know if we can trust 100% that it obviously, I'm not saying everybody that partook in it, because there was a couple thousand people that partook in it, apparently, that it wasn't, not all those people were legitimate. But again, all you need is the people leading the charge or with the biggest mouth or whatever to be controlled opposition. So we will find out from Winston what the deal is on SOPA or on Anonymous versus the DOJ and the FBI over SOPA and PIPA. And their takedown of Mega Upload. I heard some interesting different versions today. I heard that Mega Upload was coming back, but I doubt that, because I know the feds have got them locked up. They raided the CEOs of it. Now think about this. These guys aren't even in this country, and we went and arrested them. It's over in New Zealand, I think. So the New Zealand cops probably tied in with the FBI, obviously in some way, shape, or form, but I would be willing to bet there'd be one or two, maybe even FBI agents in the group with them when they made the arrest. They're going to other countries to arrest people for quote-unquote breaking laws here in the United States. But they're not in the United States. They weren't in the United... Their company's not based in the United States. The person doesn't live there. What they're saying is, you're subject to our laws anywhere in the world. That's arrogance. What happens if we turn that around and some Muslim country or some communist country that we don't like and we want to use as an excuse, you know, we're looking for an excuse to bomb anyway. What happens if they decide to turn around and throw it in our face and say, oh, yeah? Well, how about this? How about we're gonna make our laws, you know, your people, you know, in your country somebody did this and it's against our laws here, and they send the Iranian guard to come get somebody here in this country. Well, that would start a friggin' war, wouldn't it? So here comes the good old-fashioned double standard of the USSA. We live in very strange times, ladies and gentlemen.
Have you looked inside to see
We live in a bizarro world. We're going to break. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. As promised, I've got on the line my good friend, hacker extraordinaire, Winston Smith. He's been a regular guest here on my show. And I want to get right into it. Winston, I didn't get a chance to, you know, chat with you for more than about 2 minutes before you came on air. And again, I want to thank you for coming on last minute. As always, you are a stand-up guy. You always do this for me. I really appreciate it. Let's get right into it. I don't know whether or not I trust this attack as a 100% genuine attack. So maybe I need a little convincing, and I'm sure there's other listeners out there that are kind of thinking the same thing. So what's the deal? Is it legitimate? Let's start there. Is this a legitimate attack by Anonymous as a response to the takedown of Mega Upload?
It seems that it is. Mega Upload has been in use in a very popular file-sharing website for quite some time, and the recent Department of Justice actions against Mega Upload that really pissed off a lot of people, and the denial of service attacks are so they're so prevalent now. They're so easy to carry out that most people are starting to move. A lot of people are starting to adopt it as a method of civil protest, and that's basically what we're seeing here with the response to Mega Upload. Because what we have here, it isn't really just it really isn't just the Department of Justice raiding a copyright infringing website. The Department of Justice carried out arrests in multiple countries across the world. None of the people arrested were United States citizens. They were all residents of foreign countries and citizens of foreign countries and currently residing in that country at the time of their arrest. The founder was in New Zealand, and the rest of the people were in Germany, and I think there was also another one in the Netherlands. And the Department of Justice basically used the fact that they had they had a server in Virginia to as a cause for their jurisdiction to carry out these arrests. It's very similar to the arrest of when the Department of Justice and the DEA arrested Mark Emery out of Canada for selling marijuana seeds in Canada. He wasn't breaking any laws in Canada, but he had shipped seeds to the United States, and since he broke the United States law, even though he was a citizen of a foreign country, living in a foreign country, the U.S. government saw to it that they could cross the border and extract a citizen of a foreign nation and bring him to quote unquote to justice in a foreign land. That'd be like if the Chinese government started coming to the United States and extracting United States citizens to face trial in China because they broke Chinese law. It's madness, and people are understandably pissed about that. And we can see the response on that today with the attacks on the DOJ websites, which I think is actually a very good thing, and I hope it happens more often.
Now, I saw, because I was keeping tabs on the Anonymous Twitter feed and everything, the Anon Ops stuff that they were doing, and I follow them on Twitter, and they were saying that there was something like over 5,000 people that were involved in this coordinated effort yesterday. Here's my question. I know they were using the low-orbit ion cannon. Isn't that a traceable software? So someone, within the next, I would say, 60 days is going to be having their front door kicked in, correct? Or has Anonymous figured out a way to stop that?
From newer versions of LOIC might have proxy support. I'm not sure of that. I haven't looked at a version of the software in the last little bit. The early versions of the software definitely did not have proxy support. So if you run it from your home computer on your home IP address, that will show as the attacking IP address. And a lot of people end up getting a lot of kids end up getting raided over that for the PayPal MasterCard attacks. And what we're going to see is probably more of that, because even if the new versions of the attack tools do offer proxy support, a lot of participants aren't sophisticated enough to know how to use VPNs or SOCKS 5 or anything like that. They just know how to download a program and point it to a target and attack. And a lot of times they don't need to point it at a target. The software connects to the IRC or to the Twitter feed to find the target.
So basically, what you're saying is you would say that someone's going to get their door kicked in. Some 14 or 15-year-old somewhere is going to get dragged into this, and he's going to be held accountable for what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That's usually how they do it, because they're not very good at actually solving crimes and conducting investigations. They're just going to go for low-hanging fruit. I'm sure 5,000 participants from the standpoint of a botnet isn't really that large of a botnet. It might be able to take down a smaller sized website, but it's not going to be able to take down. It's not going to be able to take down a large infrastructure like the Department of Justice. But what you do see, what does happen a lot of times is sometimes hackers will use botnets, and then they'll rent out botnets that are much larger in number and use that to carry out the attacks. And that's entirely possible. Anon has been known to make use of compromised web servers and botnets in their operation. So to have a handful, say 5,000 or so individuals participating in it, just acting as activist individuals, have another handful of individuals for making use of botnets, and those are probably responsible for the majority of the takedowns. But the law enforcement doesn't know how to trace they're going to have a much more difficult time tracing back an attack from a botnet, and it's going to have a much easier time going after a bunch of 15-year-old kids who are running a script kiddie tool off their hard drives from a home connection.
Yeah, the reason why I made the comment originally, because when I first saw it, I was like, well, it could be an actual response. But the reason I make the comment I do, Winston, is because about or let me rephrase that. The reason I asked the question I did about whether it was legitimate was because of what I remember the conversation that we had off air, and then you testified about on air, how you were told pretty much that Anonymous was going to be, or at least their plans were to hijack Anonymous and try to use it to stage things. And the reason the reason I kind of put that together with this was because if you watch the mainstream media, and even the blogs and the op-eds and all this stuff, even in some of the alternative media and the tech blogs and stuff, some people in different tech places and everything else, just all over pretty much, there's always the same comment I've seen a couple times now, and it's, why don't they do something more than just a DDoS attack? Why don't they step it up? And that's almost like asking them, to get in further trouble. It's bad enough they're going to get nailed for the DDoS attack, which is really nothing. It is to the person who runs the site. It knocks the website offline. But in the grand scheme of what could be done, it is really nothing. You know what I mean? It's like kicking dirt on your shoe compared to what really could be done. So we have about a minute before we go to break. So, in your estimation, do you think that some of these things, maybe not this one in particular, but the other attacks, since the last time I talked to you till now, do you think any of these other quote-unquote hack attacks that have been blamed on maybe Anonymous or a group that is loyal to them or sympathetic to them, do you think that any of this has been a government stage thing like that Fed told you?
at the moment, I don't think they've made their move on that yet. The mega upload does seem to be a legitimate campaign, but after the break, I'll tell you what my prediction for the government-sponsored attack will be, and they're gonna brand it as anonymous most likely, but it will definitely be a false flag. And my prediction is it will involve SCADA systems. That's what the media has been pumping.
All right, well, let's get into that. We're going to get cut off. Ladies and gentlemen, stay right there. When we get back, Winston's going to get into... All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Before we got cut off, Winston was about to get into what he foresees. And this is something that him and I off-air have talked about multiple times, and other people have discussed it, but he's going to get a little more in-depth, and he's going to tell you what he foresees, and if it happens, then what to look for, and, you know, who to be looking for, I should say, and who to be looking at. So, Winston, go ahead. The floor is yours, my friend.
Everyone should, notice for the last 15 or so years, Hollywood's been pushing certain themes in all hacker-related films. As far back as 15 years ago in the movie Hackers from 1994, you've got that. You've got the whole premise of that movie is a white hat security researcher developed a virus that's going to sink some oil tankers as a distraction for stealing some money, and then the attack gets blamed on hackers. Then you have Die Hard 4, which is another movie based on infrastructure attacks where hackers are attacking the critical infrastructure of a city. Then you have movies like Takedown, which is the Miramax picture, which is a fictionalized account of Kevin Mitnick, the hacker from California. And in that film, Kevin Mitnick hacks into a white hat security researcher, one of the good guys who worked with the government, and found a proof of concept virus that he wrote, which attacks SCADA systems and attacks industrial, nuclear plants, water lines, that type of thing. These types of themes are prevalent throughout all these movies, and within the last several years, we've seen these actual white hat, government-funded, corporate-developed proof-of-concepts tools start to come out for infrastructure attacks. On the most extreme examples are the Stuxnet virus and the Dooku virus, which have already been proven to come from governments and Israeli government and U.S. government sources. And then you'll have at every hacker conference that comes out, you'll have these floods of SCADA attack tools developed by not by black hat hackers, but by white hat security professionals who work for vulnerability firms, and they're simply developed and simply interested in getting their name out there and finding the latest vulnerabilities in these SCADA systems, because that's the latest buzzword around the information security system is SCADA protection and critical infrastructure protection. But all this is leading to is there's going to be a large-scale attack on SCADA systems, which will be false flagged by the New World Order, and it will be used, and they will end up doing exactly what the films had said they were going to do, and they're going to end up blaming hackers and throwing the anonymous matter on the attack. So when a large-scale SCADA attack does happen, don't look to basement-dwelling anonymous people. Look towards white-hat security professionals and their government contracting firms who are developing it and speaking at conferences about these attacks, because they're the ones who are spending the profit from patching the vulnerabilities and implementing the solutions for it.
Kind of like semantic and all that, like with viruses. I'm not saying semantic in general, but for someone get an idea, if Semantic wanted you to sell you the newest version of Norton, what would be a better way than to, let me rephrase that because I'll get sued. So let's not say semantic. Let's say semantics. Okay, some fictional antivirus.
So yes, it would be a fictional, like an antivirus company creating viruses and selling.
Yes, that's what I was going with this.
Virus solution. Yeah,
create the problem and then say, "Hey, look, I happen to have the solution." And they do that. I mean, I know people inside the IT world that have told me they do that. Is that not true?
It It definitely does go on, and for a long time, the critical infrastructure aspects of society, like the nuclear power plants and the dams and the sewer pipelines and all that stuff, all those things used to never be internet connected. It's considered crazy to consider making that a public-facing infrastructure. But as everything starts being given IP addresses, even now washing machines are being given IP addresses, things end up on the internet. And even if a single outside machine can get compromised and sucked into this eternal network, then it is possible to worm through and get control of it. Especially considering a lot of these SCADA systems are ridiculously simple, using programming languages and architectures from 20 years ago. And the reason is they were never meant to be internet facing, but they are now. And there's going to be an attack on them, and it's going to be backed by the government so that they can use it to continue to implement controls and restrict internet freedoms, get things like SOPA and PIPA and all sorts of other restrictive internet legislations passed under the guise of protecting society from these critical infrastructure attacks by these wily groups of hackers.
So, do you think that there's any chance that we can, maybe the good hackers, which I know there are tons of them out there, is there any way that these people can help foil this? Somehow maybe leak plans if they hear of something, or if they maybe be on alert to all maybe the hackers that listen to this, because I know there's a large contingent of people that pull my the archives and stuff that are hackers. I get emails from them time to time. You've even told me. Do you think that they can maybe be more on alert and try to keep an eye out for this kind of stuff, see if there's any unusual stuff going on the back end? Because that's where you'd spot it, would be on the back end, correct?
Well, one would think, but just like the way 9/11 had a lot of open source public intelligence leading to it, we'll probably be better off as people in the hacker community and the information security community in general. They should really just follow the news and follow developments on SCADA vulnerabilities that are being released and discovered, and who's the one discovering them? What are they? What's the purpose of it? A lot of it is just legitimate researchers trying to make a name off of a hot topic, make a name for themselves off finding vulns in a system that's very popular to do right now. They can make a lot of money finding vulnerabilities and then getting contracts for the companies. There's nothing wrong with that. But what is the problem is once those vulnerabilities are indexed and cataloged, the government will pick and choose which ones they want to do, put together a black ops team to carry it out, and then blame it on a group like Anonymous.
Yeah, and then some 14 or 15-year-old kid will be the patsy.
The Bin Laden of the internet.
Yeah, and they'll make them go down in history as the bad guy when in reality it's not. It's unbelievable what's going on. 10 years ago, if you had told me this kind of stuff what was going to happen, I would tell you that you were, you've watched too many. You've watched The Matrix one too many times, perhaps.
Yeah, it's the same thing like with the Lone Gunman TV show regarding 9/11. There are all sorts of Hollywood movies. Predictive
programming is what you're referring to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It's they'll have topics in films and mainstream media, and mainstream film movies and TV shows about things like the Twin Towers getting blown up or planes getting hijacked and crashed into them years before 9/11. And so basically they're all they're going off these war game scenarios that have been developed, and SCADA attacks are one of the most popular war game scenarios right now for the federal government.
Yeah, and if you notice all the games like Call of Duty and all these other games, where's the battlefield? 10 years ago it used to be in the Middle East or, one of these former Russian provinces, Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan or whatever little stand. Not anymore. Now all the battlefield, even if it goes on anywhere else in the world, a large portion of it goes on right here in the United States. So,
because once a large natural disaster or some kind of nuclear disaster, some kind of terrible catastrophe that takes place due to an attack on the SCADA infrastructure, then that's when the humanitarian aid troops will need to come out.
Yeah. Well, we need to beat this ahead of time. We need to again, if those in the hacker community that hear this live broadcast or later on, you pull the archive or you hear it on YouTube, keep an eye out, keep your ears out, guys, whatever senses you use to, work and do your magic, keep an eye out on what's going on, because you guys will be what saves the day. If you guys want to know what's going to save the internet, it's going to be those 14 and 15-year-old kids out there. And, the older people, too, that do hacking and coding and everything else. It's going to be you people that help save the internet, okay? So keep your eyes open. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. We'll be back. We got Winston for a few more minutes. We're going to say goodbye to him on the other side of this break. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the final segment of hour number 1 here on the Orion Talk Radio Network, which I want to give a big shout-out to Jimmy X. Thank you, buddy, for putting together this network and giving us the platform here to talk about whatever we want. And thank you for not being a dick and, telling us what we can and can't talk about. That's always a plus, too. All right, getting back into it, because we only have a few minutes left, and Winston's been kind enough to hang out with us until the last segment. So, Winston, with everything that's going on, I have a few questions. With everything that's going on, have you seen anything that would indicate that we aren't as much trouble as I think we are when it comes to how close we are to losing the freedom of the free internet as we know it? Or have you seen anything to the contrary to say that maybe no, we do have a fighting chance?
Yeah, we definitely have a fighting chance. I mean, today's actions against the DOJ in response to the mega upload takedown, it goes to show that there's still a very strong fighting spirit that among the freedom-loving peoples of the internet. And so when stuff when stuff like that happens, maybe it's not the most sophisticated attack, but it does show you that there was a response. It did, their actions wasn't met with stunned silence. There were repercussions, and I think that's a good thing. And
obviously, you guys in the hacker community, I'm sure that you guys don't know exactly who did it, per se, everybody, but I'm sure there's been internet high fives going throughout the hacker community for the past few hours. So do you think that you guys, when I say you guys, I mean the hacker community again, are going to be able to get like an internet 2, a backup up and running before they they screw up or take down the current one we have? Or do you think that the whole, and let me add this, if you're not even worried about that, do you think that this whole them taking the internet thing down is just a fear-based tool and that it can't possibly happen?
They can definitely try to take over the commercial internet as we know it. It's all the major backbones are controlled through, eventually all the way through by large corporations, which are one and the same with the U.S. government. So your AT&Ts, your Comcasts, all that stuff can get they can tamper with that if they want. It's a pretty distributed infrastructure with a lot of moving parts, so it's very difficult to do it all in one swoop. That was what Obama wanted with the kill switch. That that was a hot debate, and but that doesn't exist yet. But if something like that were to get implemented, there are always alternatives. People could as the least resort, it'll go back to the old school dial-up BBS days where people were just using modems and straight up old analog phone lines to be able to dial up each other's computers, or you have TCP/IP over shortwave radio, which exists now or has existed for a long time. It's just possible and very, very slow, but better than nothing. And there's even groups of hackers that are already getting together and working to launch their own satellites to provide an alternative internet. So that's going on too, and that's pretty exciting.
Well, that's what we need. We need to. I mean, I don't want to get rid of the internet that we have now. It's a beautiful creature. It's wonderful how it operates. Unfortunately, they're going to try to kill it. So it's always good to have a plan B set up. Just so the listeners can hear it from the horse's mouth again, and to the, because there's a bunch of new listeners since the last time you were on. We got a few minutes. Could you go over again your run-in with the federal agent, I guess, or whatever it was, the federal government person, whatever you want to call them, that you talked to at DEF CON, and they explained when you got into the topic of them hijacking Anonymous?
Yeah, they definitely weren't federal agents. They were just douchebag contractors who had been targeted by
okay.
Anonymous.
Well, government contractors then. That's who it was.
Yeah, and one of them was the douchebag who leaked the Occupy Wall Street mailing list to the FBI, and was a retard about it and put all his own personal docs in the leak so everyone knew who did it. Just a bunch of really like stupid, arrogant piece of shit defense contractors. And, that's snitches, basically, a bunch of snitches. And they're talking about how they want to definitely use they want to use the whole anonymous movement to be able to false flag stuff, to be able to get contracts for their own stuff. And, that was essentially the summary of that. And what I'm predicting is, it's not going to be these guys who do it, but they're going to be when the big government false flag does come, it's going to be in the form of a SCADA system attack, and it probably will be branded as anonymous when they attack a nuclear plant or a critical infrastructure device or a system that has really no monetary value, but can actually cause a loss of life when attacked. And previously these types of attacks didn't exist. The tools for these attacks didn't exist, but they're being developed at a rapid pace now because that's the hottest war game scenario that the government's coming out with.
Really quick, Stuxnet, why is it so dangerous so that people understand? I understand why it's dangerous, but for the listeners that don't quite understand computers or viruses or anything like that, why is Stuxnet so dangerous? We know that it was created by Israel with the help of the United States and tested by both governments. Now, why is it so dangerous that it's out in the general public and anybody can pull it apart? I mean, you can go on YouTube and see videos of people pulling Stuxnet apart. So, in your words, why is it so dangerous, Winston?
Well, it's not dangerous to the average user. What made it special is that it has Windows. Previously, there were Windows zero-day exploits, which are exploits that had not been identified to the general public yet. So it was making use of these private attacks against Windows servers in order to go through and infect the SCADA controllers for nuclear power plant devices on Siemens systems specifically. And the reason that's dangerous is because the exploit's main payload is the attack on this Siemens controller that handles nuclear reactors, and its sole purpose was to scramble the dials in order to cause that damage. And most viruses the point of them has been for espionage and exfiltration of data. This one seems to be for the sole purpose of destroying hardware after it affects it.
Now, isn't that dangerous if that's floating around out there for somebody to get their hands on? Because could they not, let's say, turn it into something else?
Well, most of the vulnerabilities that were identified in it, since patches have since been released for them. So unless they're running horribly outdated systems, it's not really going to affect them. It's what does make it dangerous is that since the entire skeleton of it is available and can be pulled apart by anyone, now that development model can now be used for all sorts of other attacks.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Can't they look at it now and say, okay, well, we can't do the exact same thing, but we can take this piece and morph it into this, which will now do this. Isn't that possible now? Because, computer code I know can be
people are doing that. And I'm sure people are doing just that.
So it's going to be real interesting. Now, I know there's also a sister virus to Stuxnet. Is that thing anymore, or the Dooku virus, I think it was called? Is that thing still a problem, or have they been able to build security patches which will work through that too?
I believe that's the main issues that the main vulnerabilities that attacked. I believe they've either been resolved or will soon be resolved. I have to double check to look up the exact information on that. But again, it was special for the same reasons. It was making use of zero-day exploits, which had previously been unknown.
So is there, in the last few minutes here, is there anything that we haven't gone over that you want to get into? Do you want to give out your warning one more time, just in case?
Yeah, the main warning is to keep an eye out on SCADA system vulnerability publications. Keep an eye on who's releasing them, what type of vulnerabilities there are, what type of systems there are, and just and keep an eye out for government warning scenarios. They always advertise these types of scenarios when they're going to make them, when they're going to make a big thing of it. A lot of it goes unadvertised. And if you're working within government, keep an eye out for those red team, blue team type exercises. And eventually one of those might, one of those contractors that are being brought in might have an agreement with some darker forces to be able to marshal some stuff in. So everyone has to be on their top diligence, not really, and mostly looking towards the inside, looking at the contractors and the intelligence connections of those involved in your research.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. Winston, we're out of time. Thank you very much for coming on. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for hour number 2. Winston, hang in there. I'll say goodbye to you off air.
Take care.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be back in a few minutes with hour number 2, so don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from federaljack.com. And during a break, I was chatting with Jimmy X for a brief minute, and he had given me some information that I thought you guys might find interesting. Comcast was in a legal battle with Mega Upload over their bandwidth usage because they were trying to regulate how much bandwidth people could use, and it was Mega Upload that they were in this legal battle with, and Comcast supports SOPA, so it makes one wonder if Comcast had anything to do with pushing the government in some way, shape, or form to, have this action, what they did to Mega Upload yesterday. So who knows?
Popeye.
Although, yes, Jimmy.
Yeah, I don't think they were involved in a legal battle. Maybe you misunderstood me. I just want to make this clear, just so people listening understand what happened. It was the use of Mega Upload where Comcast started to try to charge their customers for bandwidth restriction. They were saying, you're going over X number of gigs of bandwidth a month of downloads, and they were one of the sites that they cited as being the problem, was Mega Upload. So that came out a while ago. Okay, as far as I know, that's what caused the problem that was the case between the FCC and them. Okay, where the FCC came on and said, no, you can't.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, you can't.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there was a legal, I don't want to be misquoted, I don't think there was a legal issue between Comcast and Mega Upload, but they cited Mega Upload as one of the places they wanted to curtail people from using because it was utilizing way too much bandwidth, as they put it, and the FCC told them, no,
well, that puts them
you can't
more
do
in the
that.
Crosshairs of being partially responsible for this.
Absolutely. That's why I found the conversation fascinating before with your guest. I wish he was still on.
Yeah, he had a run. That's a good point. I mean, that really brings up a good point, Jimmy, of do you think that behind the scenes, obviously I'm sure they did, but do you, makes one wonder, did they? Could Comcast have behind the scenes, if they were already targeting Mega Upload that far, that long ago now, because that was a couple of years ago, who's to say that they didn't keep pushing and pushing and pushing?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think made them do it yesterday? Like, what do you think made them just come out of nowhere and boom?
You mean backtrack? I think that they had. Well, look, I'll tell you what. I was talking to Tim Watt a short time ago. We were talking behind the scenes, and we talked a little about this whole thing yesterday, where everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of senators and representatives backed off on this SOPA, which, people are screaming, hey, we won. Well, we didn't win, folks. We didn't win yet. All that happened is we have a reprieve, okay? And I think that, it's going to be like anything else, Popeye, which is they're going to wait a little while and they're going to try to reintroduce it as another name. Or they'll try to bring it back at some point. I mean, you watch within the next year, they'll try that again in some manner, shape, or form. It'll be called something else, or, it'll be, the mainstream media will frame it in another way, but it'll still be exactly what this is. And that's to get rid of the alternative news media, as far as I'm concerned, because we're too dangerous to them. We're too dangerous. Or
they'll stick it in the back of another bill.
Yeah, sure they will. Sure
there'll be a bill about, funding, new toilets in the Capitol.
Right.
And,
at $2,000 a piece.
Yeah, at $2,000 a piece. And then the last page of the bill will be, and as an addendum to the bill, blah, 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 blah. And there goes the internet.
Exactly. Because they're not through. I mean, it's like anything else. Come on, Popeye. We know how this works. I've talked about this plenty of times on my show on Radio X, and I've heard other people say it. They put something out there and they test the water. Sometimes we're just not ready for it, and people go, what? That's ridiculous. And they go, okay. And then they back off. And, I mean, look at hate crime legislation. 5 years ago, nobody would have allowed that. 5-6 years ago, right? Nobody would have said, that's ridiculous. And now, how many states have it in because they just go like, well, I guess they make some good points. Give them enough time, they'll pass it. So anyway, look, I wanted to just point that out because I was listening, and I know that Comcast had a problem with Mega Upload as one of the sites that they were complaining about that people were utilizing because it was using bandwidth. And, listen, you don't think for a minute Comcast doesn't want to be able to charge you by the megabyte, right? If they could get away with it, they would charge you by the megabyte, folks.
They're part of the New World Order.
Of course they are. They're the largest internet service provider in the country.
Yeah, they want to be able to throttle back people's internet at will.
Mm-hmm.
No, can you imagine that? You're using too much bandwidth, but I pay for it. It doesn't matter. You're being a bandwidth hog. It's the internet. Technically, it's infinite space. They try to sell people on this. Well, we're running out of room on the internet. No, you're not.
You're not running out of room. And I have to ask this question because I've proposed this to people I know just in general conversation when we've spoken about it. Really, how much does it really cost, Popeye, to provide, what, a couple of hundred megs of bandwidth? Come on. How much does it really cost? What do you think it really costs in 2012? With the infrastructure that we have now, do you really think? Right? I mean, it's the same as the BS with your cell phone. How is it that your cell phone costs $80 a freaking month? Why are they? Do you see what they're doing now too with charging people? What is it? 300 megs? They're charging people $20 or $30 a month depending on your plan. 300 megs? Are you kidding? Come on, man. You know damn well that doesn't cost $30 a freaking month. But this is how they're keeping us under control. And, and people are, to me, constantly saying, well, this is the next great thing. We're going to be able to do this on our phone and that on our phone. Well, I'll tell you what, not at $30 for 300 megs, and then they're going to sock you and bend you over for every meg you go over, right? Once we start limiting it, man, it's all over. And I'll tell you what, I know somebody who lives in Australia, and we've talked about it. They get X number of gigs a month. Once they go over that, they're shaped. They get a couple of thousand K, and they have to deal with that for the rest of the month till the billing cycle starts over. I'm assuming that that's what the companies would prefer to do here too, right? But
you got to be able to control what the amount of time that you use. And remember, on a cell phone, for the internet, Jimmy, a lot of things eat up internet other than you just going on the internet, and maybe using Google search. If you use Twitter, that's internet usage. You use Facebook, MySpace, whatever social network. If you use any of these apps that have access to the internet, that's internet usage time.
Of course. Look, if the companies could get away with it, they would make it even harder. This would be more expensive. I'll tell you, here at the network at the, at our home base here, right, in an undisclosed location in New York State, I don't want to say, never mind, Popeye. Anyway, we have business class, and it costs $80 a month, something like that, We're supposedly not shared with anybody else. We don't have any asymmetric lines. In other words, if we want it, we get it, and if anybody else wants it, they don't get it from us, which is not the way cable works. You know that, right? If you're on a node with cable, it's shared. So if you need it, it's taken from people who aren't using it, and if they need it, it's taken from you if you're not using it. If everybody's using it at the same time, everybody has a hard time getting on. So, I mean, look, these little tactics that they pull and the price that they charge are out of line, okay? Completely out of line. DSL sucks. It absolutely is one of the worst. It's only one minor step up from dial-up, right? And people are paying $40 a month for it.
Dude, I have friends with DSL, and they're like, it's great. I'm like, dude,
no, it isn't.
Take the DSL out to the woodshed and shoot it.
No, it isn't.
Do the DSL.
It's a maximum of 1 meg download. And what do you get up from it? What, 250K? Oh, oofa.
My cell phone gets more than that.
I know. 2 Dixie cups and yarn will rival it.
Wow, that's horrible. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Perhaps I'll be able to get Jimmy to stay and hang out with us.
I don't know if I want to. All your listeners will leave. We'll see.
No, they love you, Jimmy. We'll be right back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, free speech has been under attack since way before the Constitution ever existed. But with the invention of the internet and the twisting of its use, instead of it just tracking us, we've turned around and used their own creation against them, these social engineering douchebags. They're really scared of the alternative media, which has sprung out of this. And it's destroying the mainstream media. Newsprint, gone. Old-fashioned AM talk radio, unless they're trying to keep up with the same conversations we're having, gone. FM, regular terrestrial radio has been history for a long time, okay? And the only thing, there's a couple satellite stations that have talk, but not many people offer, talk shows about what the alternative media discusses, the things that everybody likes to ignore. And that's why websites, blogs, and alternative networks like Orion, RBN, and all these other ones, they're blossoming, and they have tons and tons of hits, specifically because we talk about things that nobody else wants to talk about. We discuss stuff that people might think is taboo. Now, before we went to break, Jimmy and I were discussing radio and the death of free speech and everything, and Jimmy had mentioned earlier in our conversation Tim Watts, who is, by the way, a host here now. Tim has joined the Orion family, and him and Tim were having a conversation. And luckily, Tim was available, and during the break, agreed to come on and hang out for a little while and discuss this topic of the internet getting
that sneaky little... Oh, hi, Tim.
I looked at my clock wrong. I was thinking Popeye was off. I thought, okay, we're going to roll up Popeye.
No, you know what the problem is? The big problem with internet radio and alternative radio is nobody knows what time zone it is. That's the problem.
Yeah. I got to get one of those airport clocks on my wall up there with Popeye time, Alaskan time.
No, we just need Orion Talk radio time, and then whatever other network time. You know how they have it in the airport, where it'll say London, Paris, whatever. That's what you have. You have Orion and whatever other networks, and you can see what time it is, and that way you know.
Popeye, let me just make a comment. Tim, I'm glad you're on actually, because you can either agree or disagree with me, and this will be interesting. I don't share your pessimism that over-the-air radio is dead yet. I've always been of the mindset that if you put something there that somebody wants to listen to, they'll find it. I've heard for a long time now that AM's dead, and the FCC has allowed AM to kind of wane. But at the same time, I mean, we prove it here time and time again here in the Buffalo area. We have only one sports station. It's on AM. It's a crappy signal at night that doesn't go very far east. Once they change pattern, they don't go east. But people listen to it in droves, and it's not bad when you consider that, they broadcast all of our hockey games. So people tune in, okay? And when the Buffalo Sabres actually manage to get past game one of the playoffs, their numbers go through the roof. So, I don't care whether you're on AM, FM, wherever you are. If you have a product that people are willing to listen to, they will listen to it. Okay, so I don't think over-the-air radio is dead. So I don't share your pessimism there on that. I think that it's certainly not what it used to be. But we also have a problem too nowadays. And Tim, I think you'll have to agree with this. Young people don't use the radio the way we did when we were young, because they have too many other things to do. They don't need to use radio the way we do. So it sort of takes a back seat. I guess I could put it that way.
Because they're too busy using the internet. I mean,
they're using the internet, and they're using their, did you
see the video on Al Jazeera, Jimmy, where they took a bunch of young kids and they showed them like videotapes and like not even stuff as all that's reel to reel, but just like cassette tapes and stuff. They had no idea what a tape was.
The fact is,
I have no concept of it.
No, I know. Listen, look, I went through it. I mean, I have hundreds and hundreds of LPs, and I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more of 45s, and I've got 78s, and I've got all sorts of pressings. And it's funny because when the kids were young, I mean, vinyl was already gone, although now it's made a comeback, and it's kind of interesting how things turn around. You have college kids now that think vinyl's cool, and they bought record players, and they sell them on the internet. It's amazing to me. But, and I won't even get into the vinyl analog audio sounds better than digital because there's, you don't have a brick wall. We can go into that some other time, maybe, when we have time. But the point is that my kids listened to records in the living room and thought it was pretty cool. And when they told their friends that, my dad or my stepdad has LPs or vinyl albums, people went like, what? They didn't even know what they were. Okay? They didn't even know what they were. We are moving so fast, we are evolving so fast right now that things that are a year old now, are considered to be antiquated. It's kind of distressing to me in a way, to be honest with you. It's disconcerting.
As soon as the new computer comes out and the day it goes on sale, it's already, I don't want to say antiquated, but what do they call that? Obsolete or whatever. There's something already better in the works.
Well, there are a lot of things that were obsolete when they were introduced, mini discs, DAT tape, all that stuff. Remember when it came on the market?
Remember laser discs?
Yeah, but laser discs actually looked pretty good. I mean, that's one thing they had going for them.
Well, did they look better than DVD?
I don't know if they look better than DVD, but at the time when they came out, they certainly looked better than tape.
Yeah, they were pretty good. I agree with Jimmy.
Yeah,
and I also agree with you, Jimmy, about radio not being dead yet, because good programming draws a crowd.
That's right.
Build it, and they will come. So it depends on how you use your medium. I've seen successful AM stations still to this very day. Now, overall, maybe radio is going to take a kick in the pants because there's like Jimmy and I were talking earlier tonight. This is an exciting new medium. What's going on with internet radio right now, and the fact that smartphones have come around, and you've got the TalkStream Live, and you've got the TuneIn app. That now changes the whole ballgame. Your phone now becomes as good as any AM.
TuneIn is awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, Tim. And for the listeners that don't know what TuneIn is, just go to, if you go to the front of OrionTalkRadio.com, there's a little thing there you can click, and it'll take you to TuneIn. But you can just go on, if you have a smartphone, go on your app market and type in TuneIn, and it'll bring it up. And it's a free app. You can put it on your Roku box, which is what you'd have to stream Netflix and Hulu and stuff to your TV. You can stream Orion to your television and pump it through your home theater system if you want to just put it on and walk around the house. You're doing cleaning or something. So It's amazing. You know, if you had told me this stuff 10 years ago that we'd be able to do this, I would have looked at you and been like,
Right.
you're watching, you know, too many science fiction movies.
Well, you know, but you know what? The funny thing is that 10 years ago, we didn't have anything close to what we have now. This is how fast technology
well, the
evolves.
cell phone boom kicked up after 9/11. That's when everybody started getting family plans. It was right after 9/11 because of the quote-unquote cell phone calls that were made from the airplanes. That's what kicked it off.
But I want to just reiterate a point, though. I don't think that old media is dead yet. I mean, even shortwave isn't dead yet. Right, Tim? I mean, you know, shortwave is still viable in a lot of places because, you know, and I've been talked to people about this. You know, there are countries all over the world who don't have anything other than, say, shortwave to get their news. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, there's countries in Africa, they're like, they don't have internet. They don't even know what the hell it is. All they know is that they have their little wind-up radio. They got it outside, and they can tune in the BBC World Service on shortwave. Or they can tune in American stations if they can get them, like WBCQ or whatever, and they can listen. That's the only thing they got. So you know what? It's not all dead yet.
The millionaire will be the man that figures out how to incorporate it all into one thing that he can broadcast from one place to all mediums at once.
Right.
And that'll be how we truly take back our media. We're going to get cut off by the break, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
You know, Popeye, there's nothing I like better that right smack dab in the middle of your show, you come on and say, don't miss my show that's on right now.
Right?
I'm just kidding.
Hearing my own voice.
Kidding. I know it is.
And since, you know, we hear ourselves in our headsets when we talk, it's kind of, sometimes you hear yourself coming through. And if you're not paying attention, if you're doing something else, getting ready to come back, like getting an article or something ready, and you hear yourself, you're like, am I back on air? Your brain triggers that, you know, for a second.
Yepper. And
I want to ask you two something.
Sure.
You know, you both have experience off of Orion here in the terrestrial radio industry, you know, collectively well over 30 years experience. Do
probably,
you guys...
Probably more than that, dude, really. But
Well, yeah, I would, let's say 30, well, okay, maybe
no,
like 30.
I'd ramp that up a little. I'd say about 50 if we're...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
well, that's even more. Let's say 50, collectively 50 years between the two of you in radio.
Right.
You guys have seen massive changes. Now, when it comes to this SOPA thing, okay, and you see these companies crying, oh, we're, you know, this, that, the other thing. Now, although many of them were the same people that gave out the very programs that they're complaining about that caused all this piracy problem, so they you know, they caused the problem, and then, the solution was kill the internet.
Sure.
You know, a lot of these same people, you guys remember, that, you know, throughout the past, 20 years, 25 years, they cried about the cassettes, they cried about VHS tapes, you know, they cried about all that. Everything they cried foul, it's going to kill us, it's going to kill us, and it's always because they can't, they can't deal with this evolutionary process. They can't adapt to it. So do you think this is eventually going to go the same way? Do you think they'll be forced, because of all this opposition to it, to adapt, or do you think they're going to try to stuff it in some legislation like you and I were talking earlier?
Well, they'll adjust. I mean, they always have. They've had to, you know. And secondly, all of this is actually, it does actually bring them some new audience too. You know, there's some people that are exposed to their music on the internet that would have never been exposed to it any other way. So it cuts both ways. You know, they get the good side and they get the bad side. But as we mentioned the last time we talked, I don't have any hard feelings for the record industry because they're making all the money they need, and
plus,
you know, that's. Yeah, exactly.
Right. No, you make a good point, Tim. That's an excellent point. You know, we play 30 seconds of something like coming back from a commercial break, and somebody will write you and say, what is that? And I tell them what it is, and then they go buy it, right? I mean, don't they make out? Why would they hold that against us? I mean, they make out. They may actually have sold a CD that they, you know, couldn't sell previously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. My take on it, Popeye, seriously, I've said this so many times in the last 2 weeks. Anybody who's heard me say this before is going to go like, oh, not this again. But here's the problem. The record industry itself changed dramatically over the last 50 years. But in the process of changing and trying to revamp and buying up all these little companies and having 4 or 5 huge corporations own everything. They neglected to look at what the internet was all about, and they allowed it to take money out of their pockets, and that they can't do that. But that's their fault. It's not our fault. The fact is that this stuff was introduced to us, and people were able to then share files between folks all over the world. The record companies said, doesn't matter. They're going to still buy a $20 CD. And, people stopped buying those $20 CDs. That's not our fault. I mean, the stuff was put in front of our face, and we utilized it to what we thought was beneficial to ourselves. And the record companies lost out. Their business model sucks. Exactly. That's what I've been saying all along. Right.
You put out a CD with 20 songs on it, and 2 or 3 of the songs are okay, or we'll say are good, or like hits, and the rest of them, And but maybe.
Well, but even that is. But Popeye, seriously, even that is subjective. Good is subjective. Bad is subjective. Look, I have CDs and I love every tune on the album, and I have friends who love the same band but say the only song I like off there is this. Even if we put that aside, the point is that they decided that their model of putting out a CD, spending all this money on distribution and having to charge you $20 for something, it was going to, I guess, last forever. And guess what? It didn't. It didn't.
Well, look what happened with Napster. They were forced to, because of that, instead of banning file sharing, which I know they wanted to and they tried, but instead of that happening, what came out of that? Eventually, they were forced to deal with the fact that, because it's almost like we go through this, it's like an evolutionary process that we go through where it's first they try the banning, it never works, and then they have to kind of acquiesce and evolve. And then they end up making millions upon millions of dollars through their evolution. And then it's all well and good and everybody's hunky-dory and blowing each other. But, the beginning of that process, it's damn near impossible. Like I said, remember the VHS tape? Yeah. Oh, it's going to end the movie industry.
And, of course, you meant blowing in the nicest of non-sexual terms. But, yes, I remember that. I recall that. The VHS didn't look, okay, there's a whole difference, though, too, between analog and digital. Copying something digitally makes flawless masters. They're not even copies, they're masters. If you have decent equipment, right, Tim? I mean, you make masters. Okay,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
You could never do that with analog equipment. I mean, the hoopla over cassette tapes. Yeah, there were Maxell and TDK tapes that sounded pretty freaking good, but they were never the same quality as what you took originally. I don't care what you did with them. And if you copied them to another tape, if you dubbed it, you lost 3 dB of music quality and you gained 3 dB of noise. Okay, these were never, and they were worried about that, but then they let the digital sharing slip through their fingers. Apparently they didn't notice that maybe they could use the internet to help sell their product, and they didn't do it. So, screw them. Your bad business model is not my problem. Okay, in fact, I heard NPR this morning on the way to work. I'm listening to the NPR station here, and they were talking about Katy Perry being the most popular person, I can't even imagine. I mean, she's kind of nice to look at, but I can't listen to her.
What do you mean, like internet download?
No. I mean, like radio station play. Apparently, her music has been the most popular of the last year. I can't imagine. There's something wrong with the youth, which is another story. But anyway,
well, that's not that. But see, that's not what that's based on. If you understand Katy Perry's music, and you understand what Katy Perry is, she's just another in a long line of Project Monarch. Little robots.
Well,
so that's why
of course. But the thing
you know
is,
how it works. The station manager gets told this is what you have to play.
Well, of course, but we know that, and that's again, we could talk about this subject for 12 hours straight. Of course, they get told because corporate and wherever they are, Vegas, Philly, wherever they are, Texas, they tell all their stations, guess what? We're going to play the new Katy Perry record, and you're going to play it, twice an hour, and then the stations play it, and guess what? All the 13-year-old girls go, "Oh, Katy Perry, this is great, I love it." But the point of the story was today on NPR was that they wanted to find out really how much money the record companies made. I thought it was actually an interesting story. So they went to Capitol Records in New York, which is owned by EMI, by the way, in England. And the people there were willing to talk to NPR for the story, but they wouldn't give them any specifics. So really, after 5 minutes of listening to the story, I had no idea what all I know is that it cost them something like $4 million to produce her last album. So, you know, maybe that's where the place to start when you take a look at it. It cost $4 million to produce Katy Perry's album. So that means you got to make $4 million back plus, right, for a profit. Maybe you're doing it wrong. So, you know, again, it's not our fault.
I don't understand why it cost them $4 million when you have...
It cost them,
a lot of times...
Dude, seriously?
A lot of times they're using auto-tunes and stuff. Like, what are they doing that costs that much money, dude, when you get somebody
$1.2 million
$2,000 setup and they can produce something way better?
Dude,
you know what I'm saying?
I understand, but it cost them $1.2 million just to have the freaking band show up. Just to have the band show up to play on the record. There were like 10 cuts. It cost them $1.2 million. It was $100,000 per tune for the band to show up. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's the problem.
Whose band is that?
I don't know. Whoever the band was, her backup. Whoever the musicians are that they hired to for her backup, dude. That's all I'm saying is $1.2 million just for the band.
Well, again, horrible business model.
That's what I'm saying. It's not my fault you suck. You know what I'm saying? It's not my fault.
Yeah, eventually evolution will take its course and somebody, you know...
Oh, I hope so.
Somebody figure out a way. So do I. Well, that's what's happening. It's already been figured out, and they just don't want to evolve. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be right back. 3 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the final segment of tonight's edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I want to thank hacker Winston Smith for coming on hour number 1. Remember his warning. I will put it up in a short clip. I'm going to cut it up and put it up on YouTube for you guys to pass it around and make viral. Remember his warning. If there's an attack on a SCADA system and they say, oh, this, that, the other thing, he said, be aware. They're going to probably try to, in his view, they're going to try to pull some false flag crap off. So, keep your eyes out. All right. I also want to thank Jimmy X and Tim Watts for coming on and hanging out.
Oh, you don't have to thank me, Popeye.
Well, I will anyway. You taking time out of your night to whatever you're doing to come on is, I appreciate it. So, and I know the listeners do too, and they appreciate both of you, your point of view and Tim's, especially knowing that you guys have a background in radio, and you know what I mean. You're dedicating this much time and effort into helping out. So, thank you both. I want to play a clip for you guys really quick. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. His name is John Todd. Now, he disappeared. I heard he died now. But he used to be part of, I guess you could call it the Illuminati. He was, he had witnessed the inside part of, with the Satanism and stuff that I talked about. And I told you, I've explained about the mind control stuff and Project Monarch and everything else. MK Ultra. Just for the listeners, Google Project Monarch. Go to Vigilant Citizen. Just I forget if it's .org or .com. Just look it up on Google, Vigilant Citizen. I'm actually working on getting him on my show as well. And he's got stuff. He's got a ton of info about Project Monarch. You can look it up on federaljack.com too. But he's where I get a lot of my info from, and he has more than I have listed. So if you really want to dig, go there and read Kathy O'Brien's book, The Transformation of America, and Bryce Taylor, Thanks for the Memories. All right, I want to play this for you guys really quick because you guys are in the the radio industry. It's John Todd talking about what they did. Now this was recorded back in the 70s. He said they would take the masters into a room and perform like satanic rituals over it. Listen to this.
Zodiac Productions, which Zodiac Productions, its name's been changed since then. I'm not even sure what they call it now, but it's the largest music conglomerate in the world. It owns RCA Records, Columbia Records, Motown Records, owns almost all the concert booking agencies in the United States. And that's not even the name of the company that owns it. The name of the company that owns it is Brenner Enterprises. And Brenner Enterprises is owned by Chase Manhattan. Chase Manhattan's owned by Standard Oil, and Standard Oil is owned by the Lords of London. You can track it all back. You kind of get the idea after a while. But I was the managing president of Zodiac Productions. It's one of my jobs as being one of these 13 people. Thus, I got to know many of the people who produce music and sing the music and play the music that you play. Now, one of the closest friends that I got during that time that I obtained was a man named David Crosby. Crosby, Still, Nash and Young. I saw David the day before Christmas last year, talked with him. I got him away from this witch that he had with him. He told her to go shopping. We were in West Hollywood, and I was witnessing around to people I knew. We went off in this store, and we started talking. I said, David, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. I said, I already know the answers, but I've been gone for 5 years. I'd like to know if certain things are still the way they were when I left. I said, now I'll have to explain some of this when I'm done, because you're not going to understand it all unless you know something about music. I said, do they still take the master to the temple room? Dave said, yeah. I said, do they still have the coven conjure demons into the master? He said, of course. I said, now, I got to know something. What's the main reason for rock music? He said, come on, Lance, you know what the reason is. I said, please, David, I don't want to guess. Tell me what the main reason is. He says, the same as when you were in, so that we can play spells on people that we couldn't cast spells upon. I'll explain what that means in a minute. I said, okay, one last thing. I've been hearing that you must be an initiated witch now to get a record contract. He said, that's right. He says, many of us that weren't total witches have to be witches now in order to produce music. I said, thank you. The master is a tape about as big as the top of this podium that looks like an overgrown 8-track that the album is cut on and is placed in a machine that produces and presses the records and the 8-tracks and cassettes that you buy. After it's been recorded, it's taken in. This is why a master's cut months in advance before it's released. On the full moon, it's taken in to a temple room about the size of this auditorium that is in every one of the major music companies, behind locked doors up in the executive offices. And it's placed on an altar sitting in the north of the room and a pentagram engraved in the floor. And 13 hand-chosen witches and wizards and a coven come in and conjure a principality or a power up, usually Regia or something like that, and order him to tell the demons under him to follow every record and every tape coming off of that master. As I tell many Christian parents, you can go home and count your kids' records, probably yours too, and count how many demons at least are there. If that's too hard for you to believe, I'm sorry. That's why they do it. Now listen to me. This is why rock music's addicting. Have you ever seen kids that got rid of their music? They go around like this. They can't wait to find a rock station somewhere, and they sneak off just like getting a cigarette or a fix, because it's addicting. That's why they can't give it up. The rest of the conversation was this. You can't cast a spell on a Christian, but you can get a Christian to cast a spell on themselves. If you give the permission for the spell to work, being a Christian won't block it. And rock music is not just a song. It is supernatural.
Well, and it gets into how he says they used rock music for supernatural stuff. And you can look up the whole thing. It's called Demons Behind the Music Industry. But I just thought you guys would find that interesting, being in the radio industry, and you see how catchy music is and everything else. You know, what do you guys think of that? This guy was an insider, you know.
Well, despite what he said, I still don't like David Crosby, so I don't know.
Well, there you go. He said Crosby was, you know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I don't know, Tim. I find that somewhat hard to believe. I mean, casting a spell, even if they did this satanic ritual on every LP, you know, I mean, explain Styx.
Well, I'm not saying, yeah, I know. I'm not saying it works. It's very funny, Jimmy. I'm not saying it works. I'm just saying you have to remember, it's not what you believe, it's what they believe. So who the hell knows? You know what I mean?
Well, no. I'm not. I understand. I mean, you know, you don't think that Mr. Roboto, they put a spell on to try to get us to like? You know, that's one of the worst tunes. That's like the top 10 worst tunes ever recorded. So I don't know. I mean,
the past 10 years sucks. Everything that's been out, especially the past 5, ugh, horrible.
Yeah, I got to tell you, that's the first time that I've heard that before, you know, and I try to have an open mind for everything in life, and because I guess when you discount stuff out of hand, that's when you start to miss stuff, but that kind of takes me aback. But that said, I've always said that music is a language that people don't understand, and I mean that literally. It's a language that reaches people deep inside, and God only knows why you start tapping your toe to something, and because it's got a rhythmic beat, but there's something underneath about music that we don't really fully grasp, and it's true, through the ages there have been hidden messages inside records. I've often chalk that up to just novelty, to sell a record, Paul is dead, or stuff like that.
There is a deeper, darker end to it, and a lot of these people are Satanists, hardcore, like human sacrificing type stuff. I know that's a lot of that. It's a lot to take in, but I'll give you all that stuff off air. It'll blow your mind. It'll take you hours to get into. But I just thought it'd be interesting. But speaking of subliminals, we only have a few minutes left. You brought up something interesting about how in the new digital music when I was talking about this, how they can totally just hide stuff in there now. You'll never know it, in the layers of the music, because it's all digitally created now.
Yeah, the S-Quad system.
Oh, yeah, right. No, I know. Yeah, I wasn't sure who you were talking to, but yes.
Well, either one of you. Yeah, Tim was talking. I know Tim.
Oh, Tim must have mentioned it. I didn't hear it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they used to do it in, movie theaters. Well,
I know how easy it was for them to do back then. I can only imagine with, like I said, everything that's created digitally, they can just pop it in with these layers and boom, man. That's kind of creepy, don't you think?
Well, I think the whole notion of subliminal messaging is creepy, but they tried it years ago, and they did it for a while, right? I mean, right, Tim? I mean, they did this for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, and they did it with analog. I mean, they would splice in, what is it, 1/100th of a second of something into a film or whatever, and people all ran out in the lobby and bought a Coke because they were told to do so. We know that certain music played in certain atmospheres prevents crime. We know that it makes people docile, and we know other music makes people agitated. So, I mean, it's just a matter of time, wasn't it? I mean, with digital technology, what can't you do, really?
Yeah, and it's fascinating. We were talking to Popeye off air, and I had this discussion with Joe the other night that our government would actually mandate HD TV to all of us, because we've gone through a lot of.
Please, you know what? I'm actually sorry you brought that up, because I could go on for an hour about that. That was one of the most poorly handled things that this country has ever done, was digital television. Although the benefit is there's a whole bunch of people now that can't watch TV over the air anymore, and that may be good. So there may be an upside to that.
Yeah, less mind control programming.
Exactly.
They're forced to go to the alternative media and look for things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, guys, we're out of time. Thank you for coming on and hanging out, giving your unique perspectives on things, being that you are both in the radio industry. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for listening. Big thanks to Winston Smith for coming on hour number 1. I will see you all again this Sunday, and make sure to tune in to the Orion Talk Radio Network this whole weekend, because we have an awesome jam-packed weekend lineup now. You know what? I think people should listen to the Orion Talk Radio Network all the time. Yes, 24/7, 7 days a week. Exactly. Bye. For a second, but what I was getting into with the anonymous attack is I don't know if we can trust 100% that it obviously, I'm not saying everybody that partook in it, because there was a couple thousand people that partook in it apparently, that it wasn't, not all those people were legitimate. But again, all you need is the people leading the charge, or with the biggest mouth or whatever, to be controlled opposition. So we will find out from Winston what the deal is on SOPA, or on Anonymous versus the DOJ and the FBI over SOPA and PIPA, and their takedown of Mega Upload. I heard some interesting different versions today. I heard that Mega Upload was coming back, but I doubt that, because I know the feds have got them locked up. They raided the CEOs of it. Now think about this. These guys aren't even in this country, and we went and arrested them. It's over New Zealand, I think. So the New Zealand cops probably tied in with the FBI, obviously in some way, shape, or form, but I would be willing to bet there'd be one or two, maybe even FBI agents in the group with them when they made the arrest. They're going to other countries to arrest people for quote-unquote breaking laws here in the United States. But they're not in the United States. They weren't in the their company's not based in the United States. The person doesn't live there. What they're saying is you're subject to our laws anywhere in the world. That's arrogance. What happens if we turn that around and some Muslim country or some communist country that we don't like and we want to use as an excuse, you know, we're looking for an excuse to bomb anyway. What happens if they decide to turn around and throw it in our face and say, oh, yeah? Well, how about this? How about we're gonna make our laws, you know, your people, you know, in your country somebody did this and it's against our laws here, and they send the Iranian guard to come get somebody here in this country. Well, that would start a freaking war, wouldn't it? So here comes the good old-fashioned double standard of the USSA. We live in very strange times, ladies and gentlemen.
Have you looked inside to see
We live in a bizarro world. We're going to break. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. As promised, I've got on the line my good friend, hacker extraordinaire, Winston Smith. He's been a regular guest here on my show. And I want to get right into it. Winston, I didn't get a chance to, you know, chat with you for more than about 2 minutes before you came on air.
Well, we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It is Friday, January 20th, 2012. I'm your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com, and this is another live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. Tonight, coming up, second segment, I'm going to be bringing on my guest. He's going to be hanging out for about 35 to 45 minutes tonight. Got him for a little while. He came on, he agreed to come on last minute for me, last minute notice here. Hacker Winston Smith, you've heard him on my radio show here before. He will be coming on, and we're going to be discussing the SOPA and PIPA blackout, the protest against it over the past few days, and the takedown of Mega Upload and the response by Anonymous. Now, personally, I don't know if I can trust this response by Anonymous. This is my personal take on it, and I'm not saying that I'm not bashing Anonymous or anything. What I'm saying is I don't know if this is if it's all that it looks to be. Like if it's as simple as Anonymous just getting, you know, striking back at them. It's a little too convenient for the timing. And I just, as I've said before, when it comes to Anonymous, and Winston has explained, he was even told by an insider at the last massive hacking conference they have out in Nevada. I forget what it's called. It goes on every year, DEF CON. And when he was out there a few months ago, and he spoke to a government insider who told him that there were certain people in Anonymous that were control the opposition, and they get the others to follow them, and they have plans, I should say, of using Anonymous to do things, therefore to quote unquote justify to bring in stricter internet measures. So who knows? I don't know exactly where he's going to go, and what he's going to, what his take on it is. I don't know what the deal is with it. I've seen everybody, the first shots in the internet war have been fired. But like, ladies and gentlemen, before I jump on anything, I like to make sure I know what's going on. And I don't know if I can trust that everything is on the up and up. Not until I at least talk to Winston. Again, I didn't get a chance to really talk to him off air, so I don't.
Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell, 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's a team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team.
Don't know what his take on it or what he knows, from behind the scenes. So I haven't the foggiest about it, except from what I've seen through the media coverage of it, whether it be mainstream media or alternative media. But again, even if it is real, even if it is it really was anonymous, then they really, if you look at what they did, they didn't. The media makes it out, oh my God, they're taking on the DOJ. They took down their website. Yeah, they took down the DOJ's website so that you couldn't go to like DOJ.gov. Do you think that really affected the email of anybody in the Department of Justice? No. They have their own closed system. And when I was in the Guard, and this goes back 8 years, they had people that were IT specialists then that their job was to keep people out and keep if somebody in the Guard did something stupid and clicked on a bad link, it was their job to monitor things and make sure nothing bad could get in. They monitored everything you did live time. And this was 8 years ago they could do this. So, I mean, think what they could do now. People need to step back and think a little clearer and realize what's going on. So anyway, what is SOPA, right? What exactly is SOPA, for people that don't know? It's pretty much the federal government's answer via their buddies over in Hollywood and the IRAA and all these lobbying companies. You get people like Chris Dodd. What a scumbag. Get into him in a minute. But SOPA is basically the way that through Hollywood, and of course it's sponsored by always the same people, it's being pushed to destroy the internet. Now you can go look it up. By now you ought to know what SOPA is. I mean, even the brain dead pretty much know what it is. If you don't, I suggest you go look it up. SOPA and PIPA, SOPA, PIPA. And it's pretty much, it would destroy the internet, literally. It would destroy the DNS registry, everything. So think about it this way. It's a bunch of old men. A lot of these congressmen and senators are old, right? It's a bunch of 65, 70-year-old guys determining the fate of the internet, and some of these guys can't even control the VCR or the DVD player now. They couldn't even set the time on it. So that's a very scary thought, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I got a little sidetracked. And again, I want to thank you for coming on last minute. As always, you are a stand-up guy. You always do this for me. I really appreciate it. Let's get right into it. I don't know whether or not I trust this attack as a 100% genuine attack. So maybe I need a little convincing, and I'm sure there's other listeners out there that are kind of thinking the same thing. So what's the deal? Is it legitimate? Let's start there. Is this a legitimate attack by Anonymous as a response to the takedown of Mega Upload?
It seems that it is. Mega Upload has been in use in a very popular file-sharing website for quite some time, and the recent Department of Justice actions against Mega Upload that really pissed off a lot of people, and the denial of service attacks are so they're so prevalent now. They're so easy to carry out that most people are starting to move. A lot of people are starting to adopt it as a method of civil protest, and that's basically what we're seeing here with the response to Mega Upload. Because what we have here, it isn't really just it really isn't just the Department of Justice raiding a copyright infringing website. The Department of Justice carried out arrests in multiple countries across the world. None of the people arrested were United States citizens. They were all residents of foreign countries and citizens of foreign countries, and currently residing in that country at the time of their arrest. The founder was in New Zealand, and the rest of the people were in Germany, and I think there was also another one in the Netherlands. And the Department of Justice basically used the fact that they had they had a server in Virginia as a cause for their jurisdiction to carry out these arrests. It's very similar to the arrest of when the Department of Justice and the DEA arrested Mark Emery out of Canada for selling marijuana seeds in Canada. He wasn't breaking any laws in Canada, but he had shipped seeds to the United States, and since he broke the United States law, even though he was a citizen of a foreign country, living in a foreign country, the U.S. government saw to it that they could cross the border and extract a citizen of a foreign nation and bring him to quote unquote to justice in a foreign land. That'd be like if the Chinese government started coming to the United States and extracting United States citizens to face trial